The night was meant to be unforgettable, and it was, just not in the way Naledi hoped. In the heart of Lusaka, Zambia, the city buzzed with whispers about Choma's birthday celebration. Everyone who was anyone had received an invitation. The party was hosted at the couple's mansion, a place that looked more like a royal palace than a home. Gold-trimmed tents sparkled under fairy lights. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Waiters in black suits moved like clockwork, carrying trays of champagne and canapés. Everything screamed luxury. Naledi stood by the staircase, adjusting the deep green gown she had spent weeks picking out. Her heart beat fast, not just from nerves, but from pride. This was her husband's big day. She wanted everything to be perfect. She had planned every detail, from the live jazz band to the rare wine flown in from Cape Town. She smiled politely as guests greeted her, but inside, she felt small. It had been a hard year, emotionally and physically. She'd gained weight. She hadn't felt beautiful in months. But tonight, she tried to push all that away. She glanced over at Choma, who was laughing loudly with a group of men near the bar. He hadn't complimented her once. Still, she held on to hope. Maybe tonight he'd see her. Maybe tonight, he'd remember everything they had built together. As the music swelled and more guests arrived, Naledi took a deep breath. She didn't know it yet, but the night wasn't about celebration. It was about to break her. The night had been going smoothly, laughter, music, clinking glasses. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Naledi moved through the crowd, smiling politely, making sure everything ran smoothly. She was exhausted but proud. She thought maybe, just maybe, Choma would notice all she'd done. Then came the toast. The guests were gathered near the main stage, drinks in hand, waiting for the birthday speech. Choma stood tall in his designer suit, flashing his expensive smile. The spotlight hit him, and all eyes were on him. Naledi stood just a few steps behind, smiling, waiting for him to mention her name. To thank her. To show her love, even just a little. He raised his glass and began with a joke. People chuckled. He thanked his business partners, his friends, even the event planner. Then he paused, glanced at Naledi, and said with a smirk, "And to my dear wife, she used to be beautiful before she got fat and useless." The room froze for a second. Then came laughter. Not from everyone. Some people gasped in shock. Others looked around awkward. But a few laughed. Loudly. Choma chuckled too, clearly proud of his little joke. Naledi didn't move. Her smile dropped. Her chest tightened. Her ears rang. She stood there like a statue, face burning, eyes wide. People were staring, whispering. Some tried to look away, pretending not to notice her pain. Others just kept sipping their drinks. The band awkwardly played on in the background. Inside, Naledi felt like the floor had opened beneath her. That one sentence had sliced through her heart in front of hundreds of people. Everything she had done, every sacrifice, every moment of love and loyalty, erased in one cruel sentence. She looked at Choma. He didn't even flinch. He didn't notice the tears threatening to fall from her eyes. To him, it was just a joke. But to her, it was the final crack in a heart that had already been breaking for years. Naledi couldn't breathe. The laughter still echoed in her ears as she walked, ran, out of the hall and into the garden. She didn't care who saw her. She didn't care if her makeup was smudged or if her dress dragged in the grass. All she needed was to get away. Away from the stares, the whispers, and most of all, from him. She found a quiet corner near the rose bushes and sat down hard on the bench. Her hands shook. Her heart was racing. The night air was cool against her skin, but inside she was burning. Burning with pain, with shame, with anger. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent and hot. She looked up at the sky, hoping to find some peace in the stars, but instead, her mind flooded with memory. She remembered the days they had nothing, when they shared a single plate of nshima for dinner and slept on a mattress on the floor. She remembered waking up at 4 a.m. to go sell tomatoes by the roadside, saving every coin so Choma could chase his dream. She believed in him when no one else did. She was the one who gave him her savings to open his first little shop. She helped him write his business plan. She worked behind the counter when he couldn't afford staff. She wasn't always like this. She used to laugh. She used to dance in the kitchen. She used to be full of life. Until the miscarriage. She had carried their child for 5 months. Then one day, just pain and silence. Her world collapsed, and Choma? He never spoke about it again. He buried himself in work, in meetings, in money. And she ate to cope. She cried in silence. Her body changed, yes, but so did her heart. And not once did he hold her through it. Not once did he ask how she was doing. Now, he had the nerve to call her useless. To laugh at her in front of a room full of people. Naledi wiped her tears and sat still. The garden was quiet, but her soul was screaming. Everything she had built, everything she had poured into him, was it all for nothing? But deep down, something else was starting to rise. Something stronger than pain. Inside the venue, the mood had shifted. The laughter had faded. replaced by whispers and sideways glances. Some guests were still sipping champagne, pretending everything was fine, but you could feel the tension in the air. People leaned in close, whispering behind manicured hands, their eyes darting toward the door Nality had walked through. She just stood there, like a ghost, one woman whispered. Did you hear what he said? How could he say that about his own wife? Another asked. But not everyone was shocked. In the corner, Chipo stood with a glass of wine in hand, wearing a tight red dress that left little to the imagination. She watched the scene unfold with a smirk on her face, eyes glittering with quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to say a word. Everyone already knew. Rumors about her and Choma had been floating around for months, but tonight, they didn't feel like rumors anymore. A few of Nality's so-called friends stood together near the buffet, pretending to care. Shame, I feel so bad for her, one said softly, while scrolling through her phone. Another nodded but didn't move a muscle to check on Nality. Fake sympathy. Fake friendships. Nality had been surrounded by people who smiled to her face, but lived for her downfall. Outside, Nality sat alone in the garden, torn between staying and leaving. Her heart felt too heavy to carry. Maybe this was her sign to finally walk away. But just as she was about to stand, she heard the sound of a car pulling up. Not just any car, a sleek, black SUV with tinted windows. The driver stepped out and quickly walked around to open the door. Guests turned to see who had arrived so late. Out stepped a woman in a sharp white suit and heels that clicked with power against the pavement. Heads turned. Some people gasped. Others whispered her name. Nality looked up, eyes wide. It was Makati. She hadn't seen her in years. And just like that, the night was about to change again, but this time, not in Choma's favor. The room went silent as Makati stepped through the entrance like she owned it. Tall, confident, glowing in her white suit, she didn't need an invitation. Her presence demanded attention. Some guests immediately recognized her. Others whispered, "Isn't that Makati? The famous speaker? The one on TV." But no one expected her to walk straight to the stage. Without asking, she reached for the mic in the DJ's hand. The DJ hesitated for a second, then gave it to her. You could feel the air shift. "Good evening," Makati began, her voice calm but strong. "I didn't come here to party. I came here for my sister. My friend." Nality. Gasps. Heads turned. Choma froze mid-sip. Nality, still in the garden, stood at the doorway now, watching in shock. Makati looked around the room. "I've known Nality since we were kids. I watched her grow from a curious, joyful girl into one of the strongest women I've ever known. You see her standing quietly in the background, but what you don't see is what she's carried, what she's given." The crowd was silent. She stood by a man when he had nothing. She sacrificed her own dreams to help build his. She loved him when there was no money, no name, no mansion. And tonight, in front of all of you, he chose to shame her. Makati paused. Her eyes found Choma. "You laughed, Choma. You mocked the woman who helped create everything you now enjoy. But there's nothing funny about cruelty." Someone clapped softly, then another. But Makati wasn't finished. She gained weight after a miscarriage. A miscarriage she grieved in silence while you moved on like it never happened. That weight, it wasn't fat. It was pain. It was loss. It was heartbreak. Now people were nodding, whispering in shock. And still Nality stayed. She served. She gave. That is real love. Real strength. Makati turned to the crowd. "So I came here to remind her, and all of you, that a woman's worth is never measured by a man who can't see her heart." Tears rolled down Nality's cheeks. But this time they weren't from pain. They were from finally being seen. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. No one dared move. Makati still stood on the stage, holding the mic like she was holding the whole truth in her hand, and she wasn't finished. She looked straight at Choma, her voice calm but sharp. "Let's stop pretending. People here already know. Some just didn't have the courage to say it." She took a breath. "Yes, I'm talking about your affair, Choma, with Chipo." Gasps exploded across the room. All eyes turned toward Chipo, who suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlight. Her smirk disappeared. She tried to step back, but it was too late. The truth was out. "And while you were sneaking around with your side chick," Makati continued, "Nality was home, fighting depression. Still showing up. Still holding your house together. Still smiling in front of your guests while crying behind closed doors." Choma's face turned pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands twitched at his sides. Cameras were already out. Guests who once laughed at his cruel joke were now recording every word Makati said. Some live-streamed. Others whispered, "He's finished." Makati wasn't done. She gave up her education so you could finish yours. She worked while you studied. She paid rent, bought food, funded your dream. And now you call her useless? Nality stood at the back of the room, her hand over her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. But she didn't feel broken anymore. She felt something new, power. Makati looked around the room one last time. "This is not just about Nality. It's about every woman who has ever been laughed at after giving everything. It's about knowing your worth, even when others forget it. People began clapping, slowly at first, then louder. Some guests stood. Even those who had mocked Naledi earlier now couldn't look her in the eye. Shoma stayed frozen, sweat on his forehead, his empire beginning to crack, not from business but from the truth. And Naledi? She had never felt so seen. The silence was over. Her story was just beginning. Just when the room thought it had heard everything, Makati looked at Naledi with a soft smile, the kind only a true friend could give. She raised the mic again, and the crowd quieted, waiting. I didn't come here just to defend my sister, she said, her voice warm but firm. I came to give her what she truly deserves. People leaned in, curious. Naledi stood frozen, confused. Makati reached into her bag and pulled out a brown envelope. This, she said, holding it up, is Naledi's official contract. As of tonight, she is the new chief operating officer of Rise and Rooted, my women's wellness brand. Gasps filled the room again, but this time, not from shame, from awe. This woman, Makati continued, pointing at Naledi, has a business degree. She has managed entire community projects. She has helped build and run a foundation for young girls in rural Zambia, all while being a wife, a caregiver, a silent backbone to someone who never truly saw her. Naledi's eyes widened. Her hands covered her mouth in disbelief. She's organized charity drives, written business proposals, mentored young women, and built an online support network for mothers healing after loss, Makati said, her voice now full of pride. She's been doing the work for years. She just never had the title. Until now. People began to clap. At first, a few. Then it grew louder. The hall erupted in applause. Some even stood to cheer. The same guests who once gossiped now looked at Naledi with new respect. Shoma stood stiff, his face blank, unable to say a word. Makati turned back to Naledi. You are not fat. You are not useless. You are powerful. And now, you have a seat at the table where you belong. Naledi slowly walked toward the stage, still in shock. She reached for the envelope with shaking hands, tears running down her face. But this time, they were tears of pride. As she held the contract close, the crowd clapped even louder. In that moment, Naledi wasn't just the woman Shoma insulted. She was the woman everyone now saw, heard, and respected. And her real journey was only just beginning. The party that was meant to be the event of the year was now a disaster no one would ever forget. The music had stopped. The fancy lights still twinkled, but the energy in the room was gone. Guests were already leaving, whispering and shaking their heads. No one was talking about Shoma's birthday anymore. They were talking about the speech, the affair, and the woman who rose from shame to power. Chipo stood near the bar, gripping her clutch tightly, her face pale. The confidence she had walked in with was gone. Her eyes darted around nervously as people avoided her gaze. Some gave her dirty looks. Others laughed quietly as they passed by. It was clear. She was no longer the secret. She was the scandal. Then the calls started. Shoma's phone buzzed nonstop. One after another. He stepped aside to answer, but every call sounded the same. Angry voices. We can't be associated with. Your behavior is unacceptable. This partnership is over. Sponsors, investors, and longtime clients were all pulling out. Fast. No one wanted to be tied to a man who humiliated his wife and was publicly exposed for cheating. Reputation matters, and his was in ruins. Chipo watched it all unfold, her heart sinking. This wasn't what she signed up for. She wanted power, status, money. But now? All she saw was a man falling apart. And she knew, when the money left, so did the comfort. By the end of the night, she was already packing. Quietly, quickly, she slipped out through the back, her heels clicking on the pavement. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just shame. Inside, Naledi walked through the crowd one last time. People stepped aside for her. Some clapped gently. Others simply nodded with respect. She didn't need to say a word. She passed Shoma, who stood alone, still clutching his phone, his face full of panic and regret. She didn't even glance at him. She walked right past him, head high, back straight. No anger. No tears. Just dignity. Because tonight, the woman he once mocked had become the woman everyone admired. Weeks after the party, Shoma sat alone in his office, staring at the mess his life had become. The once busy phones had gone quiet. His inbox, once filled with business deals and event invites, now only held one thing: debt notices. The first envelope came on a Monday morning. It was a thick, plain white one, divorce papers. Naledi had signed them. No drama, no warnings, just quiet strength. The cover letter was clear. She was done. There would be no turning back. Shoma laughed bitterly at first, brushing it off. She won't go through with it, he mumbled to himself. She needs me. But the second envelope came the next day. And the third. And then 5 more by the end of the week. Letters from banks, law firms, loan offices. Each one demanding payments. Late fees. Legal threats. Confused, he called his lawyer. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice tight with panic. The lawyer was quiet for a moment, then said, "Most of your business loans and property investments." Naledi co-signed them. She was the guarantor. Shoma's heart dropped. He felt sick. He had always thought of her as just the wife, the quiet one in the background. He never realized she was the reason the bank trusted him, the reason investors felt secure. She wasn't just holding the house together, she was holding the entire empire together. And now, she was gone. And with her, everything started falling apart. Business partners pulled out. Rental properties were repossessed. Staff began quitting, afraid of not being paid. His reputation was ruined, and now his accounts were nearly empty. At night, he sat in silence, looking at old photos, the ones with Naledi smiling next to him, back when they had nothing but dreams, back when she still believed in him. He remembered how she stayed when things were hard. And now, when he needed her most, she didn't look back. And maybe she shouldn't. He had called her fat, useless, and laughed while doing it. But the truth was clear now. She wasn't useless. She was the foundation. And without her, everything crumbled. The spotlight hit Naledi as she stepped onto the stage, wearing a fitted navy blue suit that shimmered slightly under the lights. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face calm and confident. The room was packed. Hundreds of women from all across Africa gathered for the biggest women's entrepreneurship conference of the year. As she stood at the podium, people leaned in. Cameras flashed. Some women already had tears in their eyes, just seeing her there, strong, graceful, and unshaken. She took a deep breath and began. "Not long ago, I was standing at the back of a room, humiliated by someone who was supposed to love me," she said, her voice steady. "I was called fat, useless, laughed at in public. And for a moment, I believed it." The room was silent. You could feel the weight of her words. "But here's the truth," she continued, looking directly into the crowd. "I wasn't weak. I was wounded. I wasn't lost. I was buried under the weight of someone else's fear. And I wasn't useless. I was just unrecognized." Heads nodded. Some women wiped tears. Others started clapping quietly. "I've built businesses. I've mentored young girls. I've survived loss, betrayal, and public shame. And now, I stand here not just as someone who made it out, but as someone who's rising." She paused, letting the moment land. "Ladies," she said, her voice now strong and clear, "never let a broken man measure your worth." The crowd exploded in applause. Women stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. Some held their hands over their hearts. Others shouted, "Yes, and that's right." Naledi smiled softly, her heart full. She wasn't in the shadows anymore. She owned the stage and her story.